Johnny Cash asked the question backstage at the Apollo Theater, and Ray Charles went silent. Not the kind of silence that means someone is thinking, the kind that means the air has left the room. It was November 1968, a benefit concert in Harlem organized for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. 2,000 people filled the Apollo. Press cameras lined the aisles. The night had been framed as a celebration, faith, unity, music as common ground. Cash arrived early. He always did on nights that mattered. Ray's manager knocked on Cash's dressing room door just after 6. Ray wants a word before the show. Cash followed him down the narrow hallway. Ray's dressing room was quiet. No entourage, no chatter. Just Ray sitting at an upright piano, fingers moving across the keys without pressing them down. "John?" Ray said, not turning around. "Glad you're here." Cash sat on the couch. "Everything okay?" Ray nodded once. "I heard you're doing gospel tonight." "That's right, 3 songs." Ray's fingers stopped. "You asked if I'd join you." Cash hadn't expected Ray to know already. He'd floated the idea to the producer less than 2 hours earlier. "I thought it might mean something. You and me, gospel, on a night like this." Ray turned on the bench, facing him now. His expression was unreadable behind the dark glasses. "Why gospel?" Ray asked. "Because this night is about faith, and gospel is where it all starts." Ray nodded slowly. "For you, maybe." The words landed heavier than Cash expected. "So?" Cash asked. "What do you think?" Ray didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, certain. "When I was 5, my brother drowned." Cash didn't move.
"We were playing behind my mother's house in Florida. A wash tub. I heard splashing and thought he was joking. By the time I realized he wasn't, it was too late. They took me to church 3 days later. Front row. The preacher talked about God's plan, about how everything happens for a reason, about how my brother was in a better place." He paused. "And I sat there wondering why God needed my brother more than I did." The room felt smaller now. "They sang gospel at the funeral," Ray said. "Amazing Grace, Precious Lord, songs I'd grown up with. And I hated every note. Because those songs were supposed to bring comfort, but all they did was tell me I was supposed to accept what I couldn't understand." Cash felt his throat tighten. "I lost my sight 2 years later," Ray said. "And the church told me it was a test, that God was preparing me for something greater." Ray turned back toward him. "So I played piano in that church every Sunday, sang every gospel song they put in front of me, waiting for the moment when it would make sense, when the pain would turn into faith." He shook his head once. It never did. Cash realized then that this wasn't about refusing a song. It was about survival. "I left the church when I was 14, Ray said. Started playing music that didn't promise answers it couldn't deliver. And I never sang gospel again." The silence between them changed. Johnny Cash had built much of his life around the idea that gospel healed, that it reached everyone the same way. This was the first time he understood that assumption could hurt someone. Cash said quietly, "I didn't know. How could you?" "Most people don't." Cash stood slowly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." Ray nodded. "You didn't know. And I get why you thought it would be meaningful." He returned to the piano bench. "But if I sing gospel tonight, I don't survive it. And I won't do that anymore." Cash walked toward the door, then stopped. "What do you want me to tell the producer?" Ray didn't look up. Tell him I'm doing my set, just not gospel. And if he pushes, Ray's fingers touched the keys again, still without sound. Then he can find someone else to play piano. Cash left the room with his hands shaking. He had come to this night believing gospel was a bridge. He was leaving it understanding that for some people, it was a grave. And in less than an hour, he would have to decide what mattered more. The shape of the show or the truth behind it. Johnny Cash didn't go back to his dressing room.
He stood in the hallway outside Ray Charles's door for a moment, then kept walking. The applause from the auditorium leaked through the walls in dull waves. People were arriving, settling in, expecting a night built around faith and music that reassured them everything skill fit together. Cash realized something unsettling. The show was ready, but the truth was not. He found the producer near the stage entrance, a clipboard tucked under his arm, headset already on. "Ray's not doing gospel," Cash said. The producer blinked. "I'm sorry?" "He's performing, just not gospel." The man stared at him as if Cash had misread the schedule. "John, this is a benefit. Gospel is the spine of the night. That's what people were told." "Ray's spine isn't yours," Cash replied. The producer lowered his voice. "Did you even talk to him?" "I did." "And he just refused?" Cash nodded. "You understand what this looks like. Ray Charles backing out of gospel at a civil rights benefit. The press will tear this apart." "They won't know why," Cash said, "and they don't need to." "That's not how this works." Cash looked at him. "It is tonight." The producer hesitated. He was used to managing logistics, not convictions. "Fine," he said finally. "Ray does his R&B set. You still do gospel." Cash didn't answer right away. That pause mattered. "I might change my set." The producer's expression tightened. "Change it how?" "I'm not sure yet." "Well, you need to be," the producer snapped. "We go live in 12 minutes." Cash nodded and walked away. Back in his dressing room, he sat alone, guitar across his lap. He didn't tune it. He didn't play. He just sat there, hearing Ray's voice in his head. "Gospel isn't healing for me. It's a graveyard." Cash had built his recovery, his faith, his sense of direction on those songs. He had assumed that what saved him must save everyone. That assumption felt smaller now. For the first time that night, Johnny Cash questioned whether performing conviction was the same as respecting it, and he didn't like the answer. A stagehand knocked. "5 minutes, Mr. Cash." Cash stood. He walked toward the stage, knowing that whatever he did next would disappoint someone. The lights came up. Applause rolled through the Apollo. Cash stepped into it, the black outline of his frame familiar, reassuring. People expected gospel. They expected grounding. They expected something they could agree with. Cash looked out over the crowd and realized something else. They weren't waiting for truth. They were waiting for comfort. He didn't speak. He played. Folsom Prison Blues, I Walk the Line, songs they knew, songs that didn't ask anything of them. Then he stopped. He didn't introduce a gospel hymn.
Instead, he played a song he hadn't planned to play, one he'd written quietly months earlier and never shared. A song about faith that didn't resolve, about believing without understanding, about carrying weight without being promised relief. The room changed, not dramatically, subtly. The applause at the end was quieter. People didn't know exactly how to respond. That was new. Cash walked off stage and didn't look back. Ray Charles was waiting in the wings. "You didn't do gospel," Ray said. Cash shook his head. Didn't feel right. Ray nodded once. Thank you. That was all. Ray walked on stage alone. No announcement, no explanation. He sat at the piano and played. The first song was familiar, confident, the kind of sound that reminded people why Ray Charles was Ray Charles. The second carried more weight. The third was different. It wasn't advertised, it wasn't expected, it didn't resolve. It was a song about loss that didn't offer redemption, about grief that didn't turn into purpose, about pain that didn't get wrapped in meaning. The room went still. Not because it was uncomfortable, because it was honest. When Ray finished, there was a beat of silence before the applause started. Then the audience stood, not explosively, but deliberately. Backstage, Cash listened. He didn't feel victorious. He felt corrected. Later, in Ray's dressing room, Cash spoke first. That third song, he said, I've never heard it. Ray zipped his bag. Wrote it last month. Why tonight? Ray paused. Because you didn't push. Cash frowned. I didn't do anything. You did, Ray said. You listened when I said no. Cash absorbed that. You gave me permission to be honest, Ray continued. Most people don't. Cash sat down. I thought gospel was something you returned to. Ray smiled faintly. Sometimes faith isn't about returning. Sometimes it's about not being dragged back somewhere that almost broke you. They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. What neither of them knew yet was that the quiet decision Cash made that night, not to insist, not to frame, not to explain, would follow him long after the applause faded. Because the question he would be asked later wasn't why Ray Charles didn't sing gospel, it was why Johnny Cash didn't make him. And answering that would matter more than anything he sang on that stage. The press didn't ask the right question. They asked why Ray Charles didn't sing gospel. They asked whether the benefit had been restructured. They asked if there had been tension backstage. Nobody asked why Johnny Cash didn't insist. The next morning, headlines were cautious. Benefit concert adjusts program. Ray Charles performs secular set at SCLC event. Nothing dramatic, nothing accusatory. The kind of language designed to smooth over moments that didn't. He was on the road by sunrise, guitar case in the trunk, the quiet of the highway giving him space to think. The night replayed itself, not as a sequence of events, but as a single moment that kept returning to him. Ray saying no, and Cash realizing that no was not a challenge to overcome, but a boundary to respect. That realization stayed with him longer than any applause. Weeks later, someone finally asked him directly. It wasn't a journalist. It was a pastor backstage at another benefit, a man who meant well and assumed common ground. Why didn't you push Ray? The pastor asked. Gospel might have helped him heal. Cash looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because healing isn't something you prescribe, and faith isn't proven by forcing it. The pastor didn't know what to say to that. Neither did most people. For years, the story circulated in fragments. Some said Ray refused out of pride. Others claimed Cash had changed the program last minute. A few insisted there'd been an argument. None of those versions mattered. What mattered was what didn't happen. Johnny Cash didn't turn Ray Charles into a symbol. He didn't frame his refusal as a weakness. He didn't use the moment to elevate himself. He simply allowed another man's truth to exist without trying to correct it. That restraint was the story. Years later, during a radio interview, Cash was asked about gospel music. about why it had mattered so much to him during his recovery. "It saved my life," Cash said. The host nodded. "Then why didn't you try to save Ray Charles with it too?" Cash didn't answer immediately, because the easy answer would have sounded right. Instead, he said, "Because what saved me might have destroyed him." The studio went quiet. "That night taught me something," Cash continued. "I thought faith was something you shared by insisting on it. I learned it's something you honor by listening." The interviewer didn't press further. Ray Charles was asked about the concert years later, too. Not often. He rarely spoke about gospel publicly. When he did, he said only this: "I didn't walk away from faith. I walked away from pretending it didn't hurt." When asked about Cash, he smiled. "John didn't ask me to explain myself. He didn't try to fix me. He just let me be honest." That honesty changed something. Not publicly, quietly. Ray eventually returned to church sounds in his own way. Not hymns, not declarations, just chords that carried memory without demanding resolution. Music that acknowledged pain without wrapping it in purpose. Cash listened when those records came out. He never claimed credit. The Apollo concert didn't become a legend because of what was performed. Cash carried that lesson with him for the rest of his life. That faith isn't proven by volume. That conviction doesn't require agreement. That sometimes the most meaningful act of belief is knowing when not to sing. The night didn't change the movement. It didn't rewrite history. It didn't heal everything. But it did something quieter. It reminded two men, and everyone watching, that integrity isn't something you perform when it sounds right. It's something you protect when silence is the harder choice. And sometimes, the most powerful gospel isn't sung at all.